I began to come home more often, seeking out work in Africa. In those years, many friends and classmates who had fled the country for higher education or to escape political turmoil began returning home. But it seemed every TB boy who came home followed the Lamido model: get married, have babies, then continue with secret boyfriends. From my childhood best friend Polly to Smiley and many in between, everyone fell in line. Was it the price of living hassle-free in Niger that meant that all these TB guys had to find wives? Could they not just be discreet and live without having to marry women they had little interest in? Of course, the pressure on women is even greater. At a certain stage, all they hear are questions about getting hitched, as if all their accomplishments add up to naught if a husband isn't there to show off. But I started to believe these men needed wives to succeed professionally. One friend told me he would never have gotten that promotion to senior lecturer at Ambrose Ali University in Ekboma if he had remained single. You're considered mature if you're married. That's the way it works. Having found a career where my sexual orientation hadn't been an issue, I wondered if I'd be able to work full-time in Lagos at a high level without this ESA's symbol of maturity. Folks who presented me with opportunities said yes, of course. I wasn't sure this would be the case if I had remained at home, and so I empathized with friends who would to join the marital bandwagon. Some insisted I was overthinking it. Oh, you still spend too much time working in New York. When you move home fully, you will marry and have someone on the side. That's the way it is. Everyone does it. No one pays any attention to a man's effeminate gait or his preference for the company of other men after he's paid some woman's dowry and put a ring on her finger. My lecturer friend left Ekboma, decamping to England to teach. He took his wife with him, and his charade continued, though he couldn't find a solid relationship to have on the side. He isn't unique. From Manchester to Chicago, I meet successful Nigerian professionals in this boat. As long as they are perceived to be heterosexual, it's all good to them. Once I was in London, a Delta Igbo man with a thick beard and shaved head tried to pick me up in a pub on Rupert Street. I enjoyed the attention and found him very attractive. He reminded me of the late Igbo military leader, Udumegu Ojukwu. It was a plus that he lived in Asaba, my hometown. As I downed my lager shandy, I sized up this in my mind, a potential mate. We flirted all night, even exchanging kisses after last orders had been called. It was fantastic. That is until he began to give me details of his upcoming nuptials in Lagos. I stared at him. Don't you have the same pressure? He asked, shocked that I found it incredible he was going home to marry. She'll be there now. I'll do my thing. Is it just the career, or is it also parents pushing for grandchildren that leads these men to marry women they aren't in love with and don't even desire? Sharing a life with someone you don't love can't be easy, and I'm not sure I could do it.
So many issues that come up both in Nigeria and abroad. We'll come back to that, but let's now come to you. So about the style, about your effortless, easy, accessible prose, is it because of your career in journalism?
I wanted to write a book that I would pick up to read because I am more of a magazine person, and I find myself from way back before I started Genevieve that I was more attractive to magazines, and I had very little interest in books, even though I read English and literature at the University of Lagos. It was just for me a degree, but it was also that it helped me to create a kind of style of writing, which is very conversational. My column in Genevieve, which is Morning Dew, it's like a conversation. You actually feel you're in the room with me, and then we're talking about stuff. I wanted it to be conversational, I wanted it to be witty, and I wanted it to be very fluid. And and that was what I got, because the subject matter, which is depression, is very, very serious. And I didn't want to write it in such a way that people will feel, you know what, I'm not having an exam, I don't have to subject myself to this. So I brought in a bit of humor, brought in a bit of wit, and I made sure there was a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation. And that was how I wrote it.
Great. So now let's move on a little bit to the issue of depression itself. Yeah. And when I was thinking about the panel, I thought, well, if there's, because of course, being a medic in public health, I also am concerned with messages that get across to the general public. So if there was one thing they would take away from here that would be valuable in terms of the practical application of that insight they get from you. In your book, you write about the role of your husband and how valuable that was. But also what came through was it's a tricky balance to get it right. When you are in the depths of despair, what is the most valuable thing a friend, a supporter can do? Because in some cases people try and talk you out of it. In other cases people are just there for you to lean on as you wish. Can you give people advice, because they will have friends and relatives who maybe need their help?
Sonia and I have been married 35 years. We have 2 children. My son is 34 and my daughter is 28. And I think one of the best things I ever did in my life was the choice of the guy who married me. Not the one I married. It's amazing, and each day seems like, you know, we've only been married yesterday. And you know, when we take those vows, you know, and then we're starry-eyed, and we're like, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. You know, you really don't think that that time is going to come when you actually have to live true to those vows, like, you know, in sickness and in health. And which brings me to what I always say to people, that one of the biggest decisions you'll ever have to take in your life is the choice of who you spend the rest of your life with. And beyond all this lavish and elaborate and ostentatious wedding ceremonies is the real fact that when the chips are down, is this person going to be there for you? I think one of the reasons I survived what hit me was because of my husband, Sonny. We went through it together, and the 2 occasions I tried suicide, tried to take my life. The 2 times he was there to save me, because this particular one on a Sunday, it was the urge was so strong, and the voice was loud. You amount to nothing. You're a failure. Look at you now. Take your life. You know, what are you doing here? Just make it easy for you. You know, when you die, you won't feel this pain. And Sonny was waiting for us to decide to go to church. And I was waiting for him to go to church so I could do what I wanted to do. And I said to him, Sonny, aren't you going to church? He said, unless you're going. But by then, I wasn't going to church anymore. I wasn't praying. I wasn't reading the Bible. I felt, what was the point? 7 years and no change. I wasn't coming out of it. I wasn't getting any better. So I stopped going to church. And he would always try. And at the end of the day, he would probably get up and go. But this particular Sunday, I was restless. I was pottering all over the place. And this voice was so intense. And in spite of everything I'd achieved, I believed the voice when he said, you're a failure, look at your life, you know. And Sonny wasn't going to go to church, and he was standing in my way. So I felt, you know what, let me do this thing. So I ran towards my dressing table, picked up 2 bottles of antidepressant, and I ran into the bathroom. But Sonny told me later that, you know, something wasn't right, that I was going up and down. I was so restless. So he didn't know what I was up to, but he was ready for whatever it was. So as I picked the bottles, I ran into the bathroom, and he was just in time to put his foot on between the door. So I was battling with pushing him out with one hand and the other trying. I did get some in, and I ended in the hospital, got flushed out. But what he said to me later was that the way we are connected soul to soul, he could see that there was something. I have days, bad days, and I have good days. I wasn't really exactly having a bad day, but he also knew that there was just something that was happening, so he was just in time. And that's how it was for us. When I had to go to Yaba Neuropsychiatric Hospital, it was the ultimate humiliation for me that I was going to Yaba, and Sonny was there with me as well. And one look at my face when the doctor said, you have to take her to Yaba Psychiatric, it was like, I felt that I couldn't get any low, I couldn't get any more humbled, that I couldn't fail any more than I'd already felt. But we went together, and most of the time when I couldn't talk because I was so emotional, I was crying, just thinking, what am I doing here at Yaba? You know, and he was always there. If I had to go to Dubai Psychiatric Hospital, he was there with me. He put therapists throughout the 7 to 10 years of depression. I was never alone. Sometimes he would spend the night with me in the hospital, and he would tell the doctors, no, Betty won't take this, she won't take this medication. And sometimes the doctor would try to second guess that, no, you can't be serious, Mrs. Irabor, these medications should knock you out. What do you mean you haven't slept? And he would say she didn't sleep. So he was there throughout, and it was one of the reasons I fought to get out, because I felt I was killing him, that it wasn't fair on him, it wasn't fair on my children, and I decided I was going to fight that. I was going to fight to get my life back. So it's very important who you have in your corner. You need good friends. You need people who believe in you, who love you genuinely. That's no time for high maintenance relationship. And it's very, I'm grateful that I'm surrounded with such a family. And once again, it's one of the things that helped me come out of it.
Thank you. So, yeah. I think that the value in somebody just being available and for you to feel that it's unconditional. So friends and family, very important. So I'm sure, I mean, these are two very weighty topics, so I'm sure you have a lot of questions over there. I could sit here and ask questions all day, but let's have some questions from the floor. Do we have the microphones? Okay, while we wait for the microphones, I have one hand here. Any other hands? Any other, who else has a question, burning question to ask, either about, to either of the authors? Okay. Please introduce yourself, and also please be brief. If you're not brief, I will cut you off like that, okay?
My name is Chike, and this question goes to Frankie. There's a part in your book where you talk about a priest. He called you and he said, you're not different, you're God's children, he made you. And you said you hold on to that word. Now my question is, as a gay man, is it okay for someone to hold on to religion, being the hate, seeing the hate inside it? So is it okay for you to hold on to religion?
So, so for me, I'm Catholic. I'm still Catholic. I think, you know, the issue of religion permeates the book because a lot of myself and the way I looked at myself as a younger person came out of my relationship with the Catholic Church. And I think I talk about when I stopped going to confession. When I fell in love with a guy named Lamido, and I just knew that this was not a sin, this was love. But it took me a long time to return to church. And I returned to church because I stumbled upon a Jesuit parish in New York, which was where the priest said, come closer. Why are you in the back? You know, in this church, the gay people sit up front, and we celebrate all of God's children, and you are no different from anybody else. And that was the beginning of my understanding that my faith and how I believed in God does not necessarily have to be filtered by the middlemen. So I still identify as Catholic, and I still pray, and I still believe in the sacraments, but I don't always believe in the strident anti-humanist messages that come out from some of the church leaders, whether they be bishops, because in New York and in New Jersey, where I spend time, there are Catholic churches that say, you belong with us, you're no different, you know. So I think when it comes to religion, perhaps for every person who is LGBTQ, the thing to do is not think so much about religion, but about your spirituality. You know, where does your spirit send you? How does your spirit make you feel? Do you feel whole? You know, I feel whole now in the Catholic Church, but I didn't always, because I listened to so many voices in my head. But I'm very happy when I go to Mass and when I pray, and I often now say to people who doubt that, people who feel like they're brokers and they tell me, but you know, you're just a sin. I say to them, well, how is it possible that I could be a sin and have so many of my prayers answered? You know? Because I still pray. I mean, I pray for all kinds of things. I pray for, you know, and I realize that sometimes I pray for the wrong things because I get better things. But I do pray. You know, I pray for things to go well for me. I pray for my family members. I pray for my friends. And yet I still feel like my life, even with the struggles that I've had in different situations, is one continuous blessing after another. So I'm very happy to be a gay person who's Catholic, and happy with that, despite the popes that come and go. You know, I'm still there, and so are so many others. So I hope that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, there's
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is George Nakanda, and the question goes to Mrs. Irabor. Yeah, you just spoke about based on your conversation now, and I haven't read your book, okay? But I mean, I'll get to. You said something about voices in your head telling you were a failure and stuff like that, and you said earlier that one should always make a choice when it comes to choosing a second daughter and all that. At the time these voices came, did you discuss with your second daughter, and how did it come? Because I know there are people who even have second daughters who they cannot have intimate discussions with because they probably feel these people no longer believe in them, or they actually have no, I mean, they seem to have this, what words are these now?
I think you're crazy.
They may think something is wrong with me, and I mean, they don't even trust anyone to talk to again. I mean, and at that point, what did you do?
Okay, I'll start by saying that one of the projects I focused on early in the life of my magazine, Genevieve, was breast cancer advocacy. And one of the most painful parts for me was hearing women who were diagnosed with breast cancer say to me, the moment I told my husband that I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, he moved into the guest room, and then he started the late nights, not touching me, not interested in what was going on in my life anymore. So I felt it was odd because when you're in a relationship, it's supposed to be through thick and thin. But I realized that a lot of partners, male, do not know how to handle some of these issues. And which brings me again to what I said earlier, that I married my friend, and that friendship has still is still alive 35 years after. I realize also that there's a lot of grace when it comes to choosing your partners. It's not something that you can say wholeheartedly that you deserve, because we don't get what we deserve. So I was lucky and I was blessed. I am blessed that I have such a partner. Then the voices, when you're sick, there are so many things you're not thinking, you're not rationalizing. Then I wasn't able to say to the voice that you lie, that I created this, I founded this, I'm the publisher of this, I have X sum of money in my bank account. How can you say I'm a failure? How can you call me ugly? How can you say I should die and take my life? And I will respond, but I was sick. And the voice was the voice of truth for me then. But guess what? When those voices come at me now and again as they do, I say, you lie. No. So I begin to reel out all my successes. Like, I did this, I am this, I am this, I am this. I had to warn my family that when you see me talking like that, please just know that I'm fighting a battle. Don't go and think that I need to now go back to... And initially when I was coming out of depression, and I would dress up, I would look in the mirror, I feel good. Then suddenly the voice would be like, no, look at you. And all the things as a child that I battled with, my knocked knees, you can't see my tribal marks now, they're there, but the thing is, the less you focus on things, the less they become. As a child, I was traumatized by this tiny, and I had a K-legs, which now I can wear a pair of shorts. I don't see it, but it was so visible. And I remember in one lecture, in one class, and the teacher had said to me, it was really, really nasty of her. She said, oh, are you related to Sonny Ade? And it took me a while to realize that she was talking about the marks. And I really got me for, she just threw it at me like, are you related to, then she broke it down like, she did this to me. And I remember I was dodging school for a long time. So when I was getting out of depression, and I dress and I'm feeling cool and I'm like, oh, your K-legs. I'm like, they're so lovely. They're in now. They're so fashionable, And then the voice will remind me of supposing this contract you're with, supposing you don't get it. I'm like, I'm getting it. And if I don't get it, other ones will come. So I'm just telling you how I fought my battle. I started speaking back to the voice. It became a battle. And guess what? The voices are so gone. I don't hear them anymore. I don't hear, but when I was vulnerable, when I was down, I would just dress up, I'll wear my red lipstick, and the voice will attack me. I'll take off my clothes and go under the duvet and cry. But not anymore. And my 60th birthday was one of the biggest events I had. People didn't know what I was celebrating. They thought it was turning 60, but I was just celebrating the fact that I was alive. And 2 days ago, I launched my fashion line called Jew Collection for mental health awareness. And the thing is, we have to learn to turn our pains to power. And it's okay not to have all the answers. It's okay not to have it all. It's okay. It's okay.
So I just wanted to say something before I forget. It's so wonderful hearing your success battling depression, Auntie Betty. But one of the things that you keep coming back to was the fact that you chose the right spouse, that you have the right husband, you chose the right life partner. And that is what I want for all of us African people who are LGBTQ. To be able to choose the right life partner, not to be forced into marriages because society says we should get wives or husbands that we don't want, So your example, your shining success is what we should all strive for, because we all have different things that we battle. But if you choose the right life partner, then at least you are better armed to deal with whatever life throws at you.
Nice point. Okay, the hands are beginning to shoot up now. I've got a gentleman with the mic over there. Then there was a lady in the front here, two ladies in the front here thereafter, and then we'll see how we're doing for time.
Okay, hello, good afternoon. My name is God's Will. My question is going to Mrs. Irabor. So I want to ask, I read somewhere that they said we need to distinguish between depression and just general sadness, that people will just be sad and they'll just start saying they're depressed. So at what point do you get to know, okay, this is depression? Is it until you start considering suicide, or until a professional diagnosis before you say you're depressed? Because a lot of Nigerians, we are frustrated. We're generally anxious about tomorrow, about our future. We're scared, we're sad on some days. We have our good days and our bad days. Well, at what point do we know we've crossed the line between, okay, I'm just feeling down today, okay, I don't want to get up and go to work today, or I am depressed? Like, where is that line do you cross? Thank you.
Well, I'll jump in quickly, but definitely it's important to get the inside view. The point that I think the medical profession tries to get across, and it's not that anybody's speaking wrongly, depression is an English word, and it means something different when you're talking about clinical depression as opposed to just being what we call reactive depression, being sad. So those are the main two different categories. But of course, life is never as simple as that. There's a little bit of overlap. It's not always easy to tell. But clinical depression is very different. And the analogy I use is just the same way you cannot tell a sprained ankle or a stomachache to just go away by pulling yourself together. It's the same thing with clinical depression. It's a physical, it's a physical problem. So the fact that that physical problem happens to reside up here then brings in a whole new set of problems. So in the same way that some kind of treatment or counseling or something that can get rid of it, or shall we say control it, it's the same need that is there with somebody who is clinically depressed. It is not just somebody who is weak-willed or just sad. Being sad is perfectly normal, and it will go, and of course you can be there and console people. Yes, that helps, I'm sure, in clinical depression, but oh boy, there is so much more to be done. And then maybe I will also ask Betty to touch on this, is that we're talking here, and I'm sure we're all getting the feeling, oh, well, she's now smiling, she's written a book, and she's talking in the public, so clearly she's conquered it, and it's yeah, she's looking beautiful, so clearly it's all gone. She's dealt with it, and her life is totally, swimming. But I'm sure there are still, worries on that score, and still battles you have to fight. So that's it from the doctor. Let's hear from.
I was on 150 milligrams of amitriptyline, and I went as high as 250 milligrams of amitriptyline, and also on Serosat, and because even though I was in the clear, I wasn't really sure I would not relapse. But right now, I'm on 5 milligrams of nitrazepam, which for me is a very good place from where I'm coming. It's from 250, and in certain cases, in moments of desperation, I had mixed 250 milligrams of amitriptyline, which normally you should probably use 50. 250, I will now combine it with Serosant, another 40, and then I will now add Valium and Lexotan. But I'm in a good place in the sense that I know some of the triggers, and I'm taking care of that, but I'm still on nitrazepam, which is 5 milligrams, which is really nothing, because once upon a time, I needed like 25 milligrams. But I'm weaning myself out of it because I do alternate nights now, and then I'm combining it with all the organic things that I need to do, and then observing all the sleep hygiene. Yes, you still need to continue to take care of yourself.
Just to translate some of that language, The good news from listening to what she's saying, Betty's saying she's on now, is that that's just an anti-anxiety drug. It's kind of related. The nitrazepam is kind of related to Valium. So that would suggest to me that since she's not on some of the other drugs, which are antidepressants, Serosat or amitriptyline, that she's in a good place and has managed to find a formula that's keeping it controlled. But of course, the other lesson is she's combined a lot of things. Counseling and sleep hygiene, nutrition, and so on. So anyway, we can't give you the full, and exercise, yes. We can't give you the full, maybe the full menu. We're going to have to round up in a minute or so. I'm getting a sign, but maybe I can, instead of, I had the two ladies here. So can we have some very brief questions, please? And if we could. We only have 3 minutes. 3 minutes, okay. We were forced to start 10 minutes late, so I'm reclaiming another 7 minutes on top.
Good. Mine is a public comment of appreciation. My godfather was a gay Kenyan man. In fact, my first home in my life was a home of a gay Kenyan man. And he has since passed. But what I want to publicly tell my friend Frankie is that when we have his narrative added to She Called Me Woman, what people don't realize is that those of us who love gay people, queer people, those of us who are loved by gay and queer people, we, in an environment where people are in the closet or they don't feel safe, we don't feel safe. So just even reading your story has given me so much peace and so much courage and happiness. Thank you.
Last question.
Hello, hi. My question is to Frankie. I would just like to say I love your book. You will definitely see how much I love your book in a bit. Don't worry. But I was wondering, I was reading it, and I had something I noticed, and I wondered if you did as well, in the sense that you didn't feature so many women in your book, and I was wondering is it that you don't know that many queer women? Is it that? What was it? Because, for example, when you were talking about, Amadou Diallo's murder, and you brought up, the rash of killings of black boys and men, unarmed black boys and men by the police, and I was just wondering, okay, but that was a moment there. There are also so many unarmed black girls and women that have been killed by police. The Black Lives Matter movement that you brought up was pushed forward by black women. So why did it turn out that way? That's what I've always wanted to ask you, and I was like, okay, this would be a good time to ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading and touching on that. There are maybe 2 chapters in the book where I talk about my female queer friends, those that are in my life and those that I know their story and I have access to them. And I think they're great, but I have felt during this process that I needed to I needed to have a conversation about my life and the gay men around me. I have never really felt that I was in any way, shape, or form qualified or the one to tell African queer women's stories. The queer women in my life, yes, but the book is called Lives of Great Men, but it's subtitled because Lives of Great Men is about men and women, living and loving as an African gay man, because that is who I am, and that is what I know. And so for me, the idea of doing this perhaps would give the brokers, the forces that control publishing, the ability to see a manuscript from a queer African woman and say that this has a place, because that's part of it. I shouldn't be the one to be telling these stories, and it's great that She Called Me Woman is there, and I'm hoping that somebody will allow a queer African woman write their own narratives, because if I did that in this book, then I would retreat from being memoirist to being journalist again. And sometimes, as a journalist, I can say this, sometimes we get things wrong. So for something so important, I just felt like that's a woman's story to tell. But what I can do is to share some of that with the women in my life and not spend too much time trying to explain lives that, you know, stories matter, but also people delivering the stories matter as well. And I think queer African women, at some point, the brokers of the forces will go after them and say, where are your narratives? You know, She Called Me Woman is a great start, but it is an anthology. And we need a memoir like Lives of Great Men, maybe Lives of Great Women, to come out to deal with that.
So we'll task Lola with ferreting out a gay black woman, and let's get her narrative out there. So I'll just like to make a comment to round up before we give them a well-deserved round of applause, and that is that you will have noticed that these two authors, I used the word brave earlier, and I don't want to overflog it, but if you read their books, the main benefit you're going to get from it, it's not that you're going to learn about being a gay African man. It's not so much just that you're going to learn about depression. You're going to learn some very powerful life lessons, because these are two people who I'm sure even in their books you will read that they see themselves as ordinary, but they have gone through life fighting extraordinary battles. I got a lot out of reading their books besides the subject matter we're talking about how to confront and deal with challenges that life throws at you. And if you get hold of their books, I promise you, you will find so many valuable life lessons in those books. So please, after here, they're available outside. Round of applause for both of our authors, please.
And thank you very, very much, Dr. Olaokun Soyinka, for taking this session for us. Please give him a round of applause. Yes, their books will be available in the signing area. Don't forget. I also want to remind you, I've just come back from the Eat the Book session, and it was delicious. Delicious. Spring rolls with mango and pawpaw chutney, followed by asaro and eforiro, followed by braai. So that's spring rolls from Chintu. The asaro and eforiro is from Stay With Me, West Africa. Then we go to South Africa with the braai, and we're looking at Men of the South with Zukizwa. And then we go to North Africa for dessert. And then we have protiferols, and we're looking at Leila Abuleila's Minaret. So you go and eat your way through Africa through these amazing books. It's a great experience. The next session is at 4 o'clock. Only 50 people, though, if you like, rush. Also to remind you, don't forget about Mayake's story in